Okay, you're all set.
Beautiful. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this edition, the April 4th, 2018 edition of Contributor Experience. Paris is just running a couple of minutes late, and she'll be joining in a few. If you could please add your name to the agenda under attendees, that would be great. Do we have any new people on the call this morning who would like to introduce themselves? Oh, Paris is already here. Beautiful. Um, okay. Um, the first thing on our agenda this morning is to pick hosts for the community meeting. George, do you want to take this? Explain maybe what that entails.
Yeah, so we are set for hosting for the next 3 weeks, but we need to start think about on the spreadsheet itself on who wants to after Cube. We're basically set until KubeCon. After that, we need to start thinking about doing hosts. So the spreadsheet is linked to. Sorry, I can't when I'm recording. I can't really look things up. But if you look at the community meeting notes at the top, there's like a planning spreadsheet that we have that kind of lists what SIGs are doing the reports that week and who the host is. So if we want to do it like last time and then just add a few more dates, we could do that. But we're good for the next 3 weeks at least.
Great. To reiterate, the sign up is linked from the top of the community meeting notes.
Yeah, it's. Let me look. Um, and then I will paste them in Slack as well. But it's the SIG update schedule, which also has the hosts in there. And then I will toss that in the Contribex Slack for the spreadsheet. And that's it.
Wonderful. Um, okay, so the next bullet point on our agenda is outreach for Meet Our Contributors office hours. And I believe Paris would know the most about this.
I can take meet our contributors. This morning we had our 7:30 p.m. or a.m. Pacific time edition. Today we have again a 1 o'clock edition. I'm just having a really hard time getting contributors to sign up for this. I am due to write a blog post for CNCF/Kubernetes blog about it. But if everybody on this call could help us like retweet this stuff, help us like write blog posts about it, I think we would definitely get a better gauge here. I'm just up to my eyeballs right now. So if anybody on the line has any other ways to get this out, I've just been actually asking people individually, and I think George does too, for user office hours. So if anybody here has ways to get this word out, that would be much appreciated. Ideally, I put out a spreadsheet that people could sign up for, but nobody's using the spreadsheet. I'm going to kill the spreadsheet actually, and think about other ways that people could sign up that would be better. I don't know, maybe making a PR against the Meet Our Contributors doc. But George, do you have anything to add for user office hours?
Yeah, I think for both of these events, I think so. The CNCF has been. We started engaging them so they tweet like the week before and things like that. But I think what we'd like, I would like to ask them is give us more direct control of posting on that thing. So like, I'm on the East Coast and there's 2 hours that I could have tweeted, and a lot of people with the short attention span these days maybe kind of build up a little bit more interest in getting end users. So I'm going to take an item to kind of ask if we can be more directly involved.
I see Chris on the call. Hey, Chris. Sorry to call you out.
Sorry, no, I'm listening. Send the request to me over email. We have to think about it. So
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I figured there's going to be a trust thing and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
But,
even if
it's
we
just
set up like a
policy.
Hootsuite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we already have Hootsuite is I think our most used tool, but it's just a matter of making sure that what's posted is in line with kind of our policies. So
Mhm.
anything vendor new, just We've had issues in the past, so but
Yeah.
send me the request, and I'd love to be able to have this discussion, see if we can expand.
Yeah, it might be one of those things where we just have to learn all the CNCF policies and do them.
Yeah.
Okay. So right now, what is the best way? So like, let's say I sent out some tweets to promote this, and somebody contacted me and was like, hey, I want to do this. Should I just refer their names to you, George, and or Paris?
Yep.
What is the best way for people to volunteer right now if the spreadsheet's going to go away?
Yeah, get me direct until we can figure out a better way. But yeah, if they get to me direct, I just send them a calendar invite immediately.
Okay.
Just so that we have them.
Beautiful. Okay, Aaron, cherry pick process.
I guess if you look at the thread, I spent some time reviewing a PR that Tim Pepper put together, which gave me enough time to page in exactly what our existing cherry pick process is and why it's really confusing and doesn't work all the time. I think Jordan's suggestions are a great idea. However, I'm also noticing that there's a Prow plugin which may obviate some of them. I try to gather as many different issues that mention problems with or confusion over the cherry pick process, gather those under an umbrella issue, which I linked in the thread that's linked in the meeting notes. And I would like to see if I can get some support to get folks to work on this in the V111 timeframe. In the meantime, like I know Tim had some questions about whether we should merge the cherry pick doc with other things. My personal opinion is that I would focus on getting this one thing, this one part of the process documented correctly, because there's just so much overlap with other docs all over the place. So that's my thoughts there.
From my perspective, I think that makes sense. If we can tidy up the cherry pick process so that we know what we're doing for 1.11, but then also within that, maybe by the time we're done with 1.11, have separately done some combining and scrubbing of the rest of the docs. And if the Prow plugin also comes along, then the result should be something a whole lot easier to document.
Like, yeah, the short version for those who haven't followed along with this epic task is that it's way easier to just go poke a human being to get a label called cherry pick approved to your pull requests to release branches. All of this confusion over like cherry pick candidate and cherry pick approved and setting the milestones right and all that stuff is for like automation to sometimes maybe kind of sort of magically set this label, but none of the release branch managers that I've chatted with in recent history are like either aware of it or pay attention to it. And it doesn't meet the common use case of I have a bug fix in the latest release that I need to backport to multiple releases. All of these things are addressed a little better by a bot command that's just like /cherry pick, but we need to think about what labeling should be done to help release branch managers track what's going in and what has yet to go in. Anyway, while I have the floor, and I'll put this in the meeting notes afterwards, Christoph and I had a brief chat in SIG testing yesterday over trying to get some clarity on what we want LGTM to mean, what we want approved to mean, and what, if anything, we want somebody using GitHub's pull request review, approve, deny, request changes thing, like what we want that to correspond to. And we're going to have a breakout session from SIG testing. I feel like Christoph probably accurately represents this group's opinions, but if anybody else is interested, feel free to reach out. We'll make sure we forward that info along when it happens. And I'll link to the PR and stuff in meeting notes. That's it for me.
Thanks for mentioning that, Aaron.
George, you're up next with Pensive AI update.
Yeah, so this was that startup that had a bot that would take all of our Slack conversations and we could dump stuff in there and do machine learning to do search stuff. They figured out that most of our information in Slack is basically throwaway and not very useful as a knowledge base. So they're actually pivoting and not even doing any of this anymore. So that kind of just all went away. But I did find out there's a lot of people that I think are really doing a great job on Kubernetes-users through the everyday slog of answering user questions. We should maybe consider giving them more recognition or something like that. I went through
Okay.
thousands of questions with Mario and Bob just to kind of see what people are talking about in there, and there's a lot of people doing a great job.
George Freeze.
I probably need.
No, I can hear you, George.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a fun experiment. Bummer.
Okay. Matt, it looks like you're up next with Developer Tools Working Group Proposal.
Yes, I'm new here. Matt Rickard. I work at Google on container tooling, I guess specifically Kubernetes tooling. So I helped start Minikube way back when, and now I've been working on a bunch of stuff, including Scaffold and more stuff. So kind of out of that work, we've seen this kind of need for this developer tooling, group, or I don't know exactly what it manifests itself as, but just a place to talk about this tooling. And there was some interest from I guess some of you guys of does the scope overlap? Where do we fit in? How do we kind of coordinate? How can we produce something that is useful to you guys? Because there's some point where the contributors to Kubernetes and Kubernetes projects are also developers, and they're using these tooling. So, one great example is Minikube, which is like first and foremost a tool for developers to get started with Kubernetes and get a local cluster, but it also has a use case where a lot of contributors are using it for downstream projects like Istio and all of these other projects as part of their developer experience. So there is some overlap there, and just figuring out how we could communicate that to you guys so that we could get feedback from contributors on these tools and just kind of share information in the best way possible. And then also, I guess, another kind of topic relevant for this group is, I guess this is more of a personal issue, but I mean, in Slack right now, we have a Minikube Slack channel with, I think it's got over 2,000 people in it. There's a draft Slack channel. And it's great to have Slack channels for these specific tools, but the contributors to these tools don't talk to each other, which is a bit of a problem. So I don't know if we create this working group, if we have a Slack channel, maybe that alleviates some of this pain, but actually getting the contributors of these tools talking to each other and not having, I feel like sometimes users are in the Minikube Slack channel and they don't realize that there's some alternatives, Kubernetes and Docker for Mac. And, we just want contributors to have the best experience possible.
Absolutely. So what would be the most helpful or useful for you in terms of getting that feedback?
Yeah, I mean, just figuring out a way that I don't know what we could produce as a group. I don't know if it's some sort of report or some sort of channel where we could actively get feedback on these tools from contributors who, maybe aren't using these tools day to day, but are kind of experts in, the underlying technology. So, basically, how can we scope this project to help you guys more so?
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, so based off of, like, I have a little bit of background in this because I was in SIG testing yesterday where Matt was making basically this exact same talk. I think from a scoping perspective, I think that's the first step that needs to be done is scoping, like, what is covered, what is not, and where there's overlap with existing SIGs. I think the one that is the biggest potential overlap is with SIG apps. I don't think there is any direct overlap with contributor experience and like the direct upstream development of Kubernetes itself, as opposed to developing apps on top of Kubernetes. So I don't think there's any potential overlap with what we do, but definitely informing, like, I think we would be downstream consumers of things that may come out of this. because testing, like, as was mentioned yesterday in SIG testing Kubernetes and testing the upstream Kubernetes against whatever development tools are out there provides a good user experience across the board. But yeah, I think right now, if anybody has any feedback, I think the best place to go and leave that feedback is the KDev thread on this, as they as the people involved in this working group kind of figure out scope and go and talk to the various SIGs.
Cool. That sounds good. Yeah, just making sure that like we have an effective way of sharing information. If this group there might not be overlap between these SIGs, but we want an effective way to actually communicate what we find, what we're working on. Because I mean, we've noticed in the past that the tools that we work on, sometimes the features are not as broadly broadcast as we would hope. So just making sure that everyone's kind of on the same page and we're not reinventing the wheel anywhere. So,
and Matt, happy to create a Slack channel for you too. If you visit the Slack admins channel and just drop in whatever suggested name that you have for the group, we can even create that within the hour that you request it. So feel free to do that. And then what you can do is advertise that channel into all of the developer tools individually and let them know that, that's a channel that might be interest to them. So definitely Slack is an area that we have a lot of, give for. So feel free to jump into that today.
We do, but I kind of agree with the point Ryan made in chat. Like, I feel like a lot of this discussion could be had in SIG apps, and like, okay, number one, getting people to actually talk to each other is hard, as it turns out. But I think like if you take the effort to lurk in SIG apps, and when people are asking questions about dev tooling, you can sort of route them to the right channel or place. That sometimes does provide high visibility that, hey, there are like other efforts going on. And if you continue to have conversations about this stuff in there, like I get the impression that conversations around dev tooling already happen in SIG apps, and it's the number one place where if people are like trying to develop an app on Kubernetes and they're not sure what tools are out there to help them do that, I usually see them land in that channel. So I think more of an active presence there kind of gets you an audience to begin with who's receptive to any answers you might be able to provide. But the problem of getting like the individual sub-project maintainers to remind themselves that there's a broader world out there and talk to each other, that's a little bit, that takes a little bit more effort. But I think that's something SIG apps could absolutely help with.
Okay. Paris, KubeCon EU update and deep dive.
Yeah. So follow up to my email from earlier this week. Might have even been yesterday. I'm not even sure. But we have 2 slots at KubeCon EU. One is an update. One is a deep dive. Update is essentially what we've been doing for the roadshow, just updating people as to what we've been working on, why we're working on it, why we care. And then the deep dive is going into either one of the projects that we're working on or a problem that we're having and getting audience feedback, contributor feedback, and possibly even getting some work done during that session. Both are actually only 30 minutes though. So I feel like the update is sort of covered, and I'll email everyone, and Elsie and I will put together some slides for that and email everyone those slides to make sure that we're covering all of the work that's being done in the group, like I'd say a week before KubeCon, hopefully. But then the deep dive, I did talk to Ryan J at Red Hat. Is he on the line? I thought I saw, yeah, there he is. Ryan, you still cannot come, correct?
I do not have my travel booked as of yet.
Okay.
So I should look for someone else to fill that slot
Okay.
while, yeah.
Okay, so we were thinking that Ryan would cover the developer guide for the deep dive, but it doesn't sound like Ryan is officially on the hook for travel yet. TPEP, how do you feel about covering that kind of a session? I mean, I'm also down to help and moderate and time box us and keep us honest. But I think the developer guide would be a really great 30-minute spend at KubeCon.
Yeah, I just got to double check my specific calendar schedule where I'm already committed.
Yeah, I think it's Thursday at 15:50. So yeah, just get with me offline and we'll figure it out. But does anybody, my point of bringing it up on this conversation is, does anybody have any other deep dive topics that they think we should be covering that are either more important or would be better for us to spend our 30 minutes with? No? Everybody's in agreement?
Is Gwen going? Erin, do you know if Gwen's going? She did a really good job on, I thought she did a great job on the basic intro to contributor at the scale event. And she may only need to add one or two more sections to cover developer stuff. She might be good to leverage or to go through some of her slides and repurpose them if she's up for it.
Yeah, totally. We're working that out. Hopefully I'll have an answer for you soon.
Okay, well, supposedly she's on the hook for the new contributor workshop. So if she's not going to be able to make it.
Yeah, I'll let you know as soon as I have more.
I'm around all week as well, so if you need someone to talk about a topic, I can figure something out.
Okay. All right, so I think we have our KubeCon plans ready to go. Cool, thanks y'all.
Beautiful. Paris, you're next. Mentor names.
All right, so with the mentoring program, we have 5 different projects, all of which are individuals helping upstream contributors. I'd like to give them an identity outside of thanks for helping. And this is how we form communities, is by giving people identities in this field. So for instance, Docker has captains. However, in Docker's sense, that's evangelists, not mentors. Not like it necessarily matters for branding, but I think you kind of understand what I'm saying here. And ideally, when we blog about this and when we get more PR about this and do more docs, we will say Kubernetes, insert word here. And the insert word here has been racking my brain. And this is the call for help. I've actually engaged 4 marketing professionals, including folks at Linux Foundation, and none of us can come up with a good solution. I have a short list. And what we are planning to do is get the short list out to the steering committee and have them shorten it down even more. And then after that, we'll do like some kind of fun contest to KDev to get folks to pick the name for us. But I'm not necessarily inspired by any of these names. I'll go on public record and say that. And I think it's also because I've been working with it for at least 3 months. So in the land of creative services, when you've been working with something, you're like, I just want this to be shipped and done with already. So I could call them like hippos and I'd be totally happy with it at this point. But some of the names that we have are like Kubernetes mentors, because believe it or not, the word mentor is Greek, and that would go with us. However, I think that's kind of bland and doesn't really capture the essence of what these people are doing. So for instance, these people are not mentoring users, and our user base and our contributor base have a serious Venn diagram overlap. As everybody here knows. So I want to make sure that these people are not going to also get bombarded with user-based questions when they are on their Twitter bio that says Kubernetes mentor, which they most likely will. And of course, most of these people would probably help them because all of them are so empathetic. But again, at the same time, I really want to try to make something quirky and creative. I have a list that I'm going to share with everyone as soon as I can dig it out of my email right now. I'll share it with everyone in the Zoom chat, also in the Slack chat as well. But in the meantime, does anybody have any suggestions that come to mind immediately?
Champions with a K? I don't know.
Actually, I didn't think about that either. That's a good one, Chris.
Of course, I don't know if that translates to something terrible in like German or something.
Yeah, let's make sure we don't do the collaborator thing again.
Yeah, I'm Googling.
Yeah, look, champions with a Q. Yeah. Shipwright in Greek. Oh. Yeah, that could be good too, Josh. Yeah, so the words that I just put in the chat, Kubernetes pilot. So we have pilot right now. That's what I've been working with just to keep going and not have a blocker. But I don't know if everybody knows, but Kubernetes means helmsman, which ultimately means pilot. So I feel like it's kind of like saying water is wet. Also, when we have called people pilots in the past, people thought that they were testing Kubernetes. So that was a little bit unclear there. We also have Kubernetes skipper, Kubernetes contributor mentor. So adding 3 words, but that's kind of long, but we can condense that into like Kate's. So Kate's mentor, Kate's contributor mentor or guide or advisor. Kubernetes ladder mentor, guide, or advisor, Kubernetes upstream guide or advisor, and then also kube-mentor, kube mentor, kube MNTR to play on kube control.
Sorry.
I know. I laughed so hard.
Do we get to argue about how? Does that mean we get to argue about how to pronounce it now?
Yeah, maybe.
Yes, that would be that. Awesome.
Maybe my idea of Kentor isn't so bad after all.
And then the last one that I really love is Cube Buddy. So, and I did take off one on the list, but Cube Bestie. So.
Oh God.
I was also going to suggest the Kubernetes mate, since mate's usually the term used to represent different ranks of the ship's crew.
Yeah, we could do Cube mates. I'm on a call, friend. This is our new tech writer that just came over to my desk. Hey, there you go. Hey. I like Cube mates too, actually. Yeah, especially if it's spelled out as all one word.
Yeah.
Nice.
The t-shirt will be cool too, because it's KASM8S. Could be kind of like a cool lingo.
Kate's mate. Yeah, okay, so I'll add this to the short list. And yeah, just everybody get your creative juices flowing and get back to me, DM me on Slack, reach out to me by Pigeon Owl, doesn't matter, get to me. And I'm going to send the short list this afternoon to the steering committee, have them laugh at the list for a little while, give them a good hearty Wednesday laugh, and then, and then we will go forward. The reason why this is such a blocker for me is because I want to write more and more documentation, and I can't write insert word here anymore, and that does not suffice for blog posts. So much appreciated on the help front, and the winner will obviously get multiple swag items from me. So very awesome. Thank you very much. I'm done with that topic.
Okay. So you're still up, Paris, with taking on moderation for K users and KW mailing lists.
All right. So we did find out this week we had some hiccups on the spam glitch, and folks were thinking that their emails were deleted and things like that. So that brought up the topic of who owns these lists. The lists again being Kubernetes-dev, Kubernetes-users. These are the Google groups that we own. CNCF also moderates other lists, but the current owners for these groups are individuals, mostly Brian Grant and some other folks that have started the project and have been with the project forever. So they are curious as to where this moderation should sit. I think we moderate most communication channels at this point through Contributor Experience. I think that we should probably house those here. Like, I think K users is a little bit of a stretch, but it's not the first stretch that we're taking on by any means. But again, it's kind of like what we said earlier, and to Matt's point with the working group, it's like we're a horizontal group, and our users are contributors for the most part, and vice versa. So I think we should get a tiger team together, probably the same team that we have for Slack, and other people who would like to moderate this. And when I say moderate, I mean that in the lightest form possible. lightest, literally lightest. But this is just making sure that because spam has come through lately. The spam is deleted in a timely fashion, and that people are acting appropriately. And I mean, we typically don't have any of those cases, but I don't know, what are any thoughts or concerns or questions about taking over moderation for KDEV and K users?
So is the suggestion to make this a separate sub-project or to make this duties of the community management sub-project?
I mean, this would be duties of community management sub-project.
Okay, yeah, that sounds super straightforward to me.
Yeah, it looks like we're stuck with it. It is what it is, I think. Maybe we can rotate it out every 3 months so people don't go crazy.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like, so we have 34,000 people on Slack right now, and 4 of us are active Slack admins, and we handle that okay. None of us have, I mean, some of us have kind of pulled our hair out, but we're still head full of hair.
Is this hair pulling in terms of dilemma or in terms of workload?
Just workload. I mean, just the random questions and comments that come through. But I mean, it's not, like I said, it's nothing that's not manageable. Not manageable. So,
what would it take to grow the pool of people who you would deem as capable for moderation?
I guess people that step forward that we know have been with the project and understand our code of conduct and don't have any violations themselves. We probably need a process in which we decide who and what. I mean, right now it's just been people that have asked to be put on, and based off time zones and things like that, especially with Slack. So we probably put in some kind of guidelines around time zones and coverage and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, I think the thing that's making me pause is I'm just trying to suggest something like clear guidelines that like the ideal but impossible case is a super strict decision tree that says, yes, you should, do something. No, you should not do something, because then you could run anybody through that. On the other end of the spectrum, we have like, don't violate the code of conduct. And I feel like the guidelines for moderation are probably somewhere in the middle, where you need to trust moderators to have discretion, yes. But it should also be pretty clear, like when people are stepping over the line, what line they stepped over.
And we have Slack guidelines written down and checked in at this point. So all we have to do is modify that to include the mailing lists, or just copy that and change wording to mailing lists.
Mm-hmm. Or all communications channels. I feel like the workload, creating SIG and renaming channels and stuff is like more than moderation workload.
Yeah.
Recently.
Yeah.
There was a spam problem for a little while, but it hasn't happened in 3-4 months. But
yeah, the moderation of mailing lists versus Slack is probably 20% of the workload that Slack moderators get. So if that, I mean, maybe even 10, honestly. So it's a much, much smaller workload, but if this group's taking it on, then that's, again, in addition to the workload of the moderators that are doing both. So I will start with a draft first pass at moderation guidelines, and then we'll take it to this group next week to see what everybody's thoughts are.
Great.
I have just one question. I'm going to put Aaron on the spot with your steering committee hat. Is there an update as far as a code of conduct committee, as far as an escalation point? If, like, from a light community management standpoint, a light moderation standpoint, if there is questions or if a problem does arise?
Until such time as there is a code of conduct committee, if there is one, just treat the steering committee as a code of conduct committee. I personally would like to break that responsibility out into a separate committee of people, but bandwidth issues at the moment. So it's still like, It's still on our minds. I think the last time we discussed it, the consensus was it doesn't seem like it's so much of a problem that we need to get to it right now. We've been able to manage thus far. Some of us are more paranoid about that than others. And I think like more, this is kind of why I was asking about moderation. I think more of our concern is over whether or not the code of conduct that we have today, whether or not that is sufficient for us. I think there are some who would rather see a little more detail spelled out, but we haven't really gotten to the point of identifying when and how we would like to tackle that. I know like Dan Kahn has been super open to the idea of amending the CNCF's code of conduct. It's just something we haven't gotten to yet. That's why it's important that there's like a certain level of discretion and trust involved. Does that answer your question? Okay, I know it's not like the greatest answer, but it's the answer we have today. Steering hat off.
Okay. So Dev, I think you're on the call, right?
Yes. Hi. Yep. So I'm just seeing that one. I'm not sure who put it there, but it's good. I think, I don't know, Aaron, Christoph, Paris, if you put the, so yeah. I think I didn't put it in the agenda, but we can have a quick discussion, Aaron, Christoph, because
yeah, I did. I'm sorry, Sadav.
Oh, Paris, you did. Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Yep,
I
good.
did. Just because I saw it in the queue today, and I know you haven't gotten an official like closure or next step yet, so I just want to make sure that you did. So I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no. That's fine, and I'm glad you did it. So I think we can have a quick discussion around it. So just to brief about the issue, it's about the new labels we recently added, and this particular issue is about sort of updating the triage guidelines, showing the usage for these labels. Right. So mainly we have comments from Aaron on a separate issue, not in this particular issue, but for this issue, and then Christoph. And I think we want to just make sure what's the clear usage of these labels, and also to make sure that are they ready to use, because we haven't have any associated bot commands yet, right? So, I mean, Aaron, Christoph, any comments from you to move this forward? We have provided the motivations for these labels earlier, when we sent the proposal. I worked with Garrett that time. Eric Festa had lots of comment in the doc as well. And then, we had the email list proposal, and we did get some comments there as well from Jordan, Brian Grant. But the eventual concession was to go forward with it. I did bring up at the country backs meeting last month at Index Paris, and by that time, we had like a few weeks already for the proposal. So we decided like, let's just go ahead and have this label added. So the label has, yeah.
So I hear all of the history. I guess like my apologies for like having maybe a slight change of opinion now that we're this far in course. But to me, the change of opinion came from the fact that to implement this with a bot command, the suggestion was to use /close and then optionally a reason after that. The difficulty is that /close is a command that only people who are members of the Kubernetes org can use. And my understanding of the reason for these labels was to allow a broader audience of people who haven't yet become members of the Kubernetes organization to do issue triage as one way of demonstrating intent to help out the community. And if that's the case, it's technically like difficult to have different invocations of the same bot command be restricted to different groups of users. So my suggestion was, it kind of seems like these labels are already intended more for issue triage, not necessarily issue closure. And so I'm wondering if it made sense to rename them to triage foo and then have a /triage command for that. Stepping back a little bit more, like just personally speaking, I have an objection to spraying more labels all over the Kubernetes organization when we don't actually have a reason to use them. The fact that there's no bot commands for these means that only a restricted group of people can actually use them. And I would have preferred this to be done where like the commands that use the labels were implemented and then the labels were rolled out.
No, absolutely, Aaron, and you know, I mean, even today also, and when we propose these labels, the intention was never to have you know, like a associated bot commands for this label. So the intention was, and I know I did put in the the issue as well. The intention was for people who do not have, you know, who are not like an org member, who do not have a privilege to close something, right, to run a bot command. So for anyone, like a new contributors, right, if someone is looking at the issue, the intention for this label was for them to just add the label so that, you know, and I know I kept saying that to identify issues which are the closed candidates. So what happens is, if I'm not an org member, for example, I'm a new contributor, I'm looking at some issue, I'm like, hey, this is a duplicate issue, or this is, I cannot recreate, you know, reproduce it anymore, right? As a non-org member, you know, I would just add a comment. That's all I could do, right? You know, you can have some labels for SIG and whatnot, but I'll just add the comments. Now, these issues are easy to close by someone who has the authority to close, who can do the / close command, right? The intention for this label is, you know, as an org member, I can go and search for this particular label, you know, with the close, whether it's a close duplicate, close, you know, cannot reproduce, or, you know, close. There are 4 different labels there, but you know, I can, as an org member, can go and search for this label, or if I'm, you know, for a particular SIG member as well, and then, you know, those are like an easy close because somebody already did some work there, right? Could not reproduce or anything. And you know, if there are, I can find like 20 these issues, it would be easy to close versus, you know, you cannot really search for the comments, right? Versus searching for the labels.
So I'm in agreement with that. I'm just saying, as a technical implementation detail, if you want to enable people who were formerly only capable of applying comments to apply these triage labels, there needs to be a bot command for that. And in order to implement the bot command such that they can do it, it's got to be named something other than close. And so typically when we've allowed people to add anybody to add a label, so like /sigfoo or /priorityfoo, the labels are prefixed with that bot command. So I'm just suggesting, instead of calling the labels closed, duplicate, closed, cannot reproduce, call them triaged / cannot duplicate or whatever. So you still get the use case where like we could have humans or bots go search for everything that's been triaged, and we're enabling people who are not yet org members to apply these labels to do good work in triaging issues for us.
Yep. That sounds really good to me, Aaron. You know, that serves the purpose, right? For folks to identify the issues which are sort of triage initially. So, do we want a further discussion on that about replacing the close with triage, and you know, or I can just go ahead and create a PR to change those labels. If that makes sense, or?
So I can help work with you on that. If you want to reply to the issue that I linked in the agenda, it's 7251 in test infra. We can move the ball forward there.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
I thought I saw George waving for a second, but I don't know if that was intended for us.
Yeah, I see Sarah Novotny way in the back there, and I just wanted to wave. She looked over at us. Everyone wave.
Okay, thank you for bringing that to our attention, George. Much appreciated.
Gotta keep it real, man.
And thanks again, Paris, for having this in the agenda. I think we are close to resolve it now. So it's good.
Good. All right.
I'm the next one. Sorry, I didn't put my
Go
name
for it.
next to it. I'll do that now. Yeah, so I just noticed, like, Paris, you have sent out new calendar invites to suggest that we're just doing a weekly meeting cadence now. Maybe if Christoph, you want to take the lead on updating SIG XAML to reflect that as well, because right now the generated documentation in the community website says we're doing bi-weekly, off week, whatever stuff.
Yeah, no, I just haven't had the time to do that. I did it yesterday, so I just haven't gotten a chance. But if somebody else could take the lead on that, that would be awesome.
Great.
Yeah, I don't mind doing that.
Paris, could you also add the meeting notes to the Cal invite? I noticed that that didn't make it on.
Yep.
Thank you. George, community maintenance tasks.
Yeah, so if you follow the link, none of this should be a surprise. We went through this as a Google Doc, and then it's actually sitting as a template in community/SIG Contributor Experience, and the idea is once a quarter or whatever, we copy it over. And this is kind of like stuff that doesn't automate very well, auditing Slack channels, that kind of stuff. So I made a checklist that I was thinking, hey, it'd be really great if we did this before KubeCon. The one I mostly need help on is the GitHub stuff, because I know a lot of you are in there every single day, so I'm assuming that like you just would check off those boxes. But if any one of these items anyone wants to take, feel free to either just do it and check the box and put your name by it. And that's pretty basically what it is. And if you can think of any other things that we should be checking regularly, do a pull request on the template in SIG Contributor Experience directory, not this one.
I'll definitely take the Slack one and also add in some Slack audit items that I forgot in there as well.
Yeah.
So we'll cover it on that.
Yep. And that's it for that one. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And then I think, George, you have the next one as well.
Yes. Yeah, so this is already turning into a bike shed. So a few weeks ago when people were complaining about the Slack gateway being shut down, it's like, hey, what are we doing? Why aren't we using IRC? Blah, blah, blah. And that turned into a thing. But as I was thinking, as I was working with Joe on Ket 5, as far as having a branded community site that has like a page for each SIG to have, your meeting and the calendars all integrated and all these great ideas, kind of noticed that our user experience as far as user support is kind of pretty terrible. It's just a bunch of Google groups. And so I was like, I wonder why we don't have user forums like Docker, Mozilla, and a whole bunch of other open source projects. So I started thinking, I talked to Chris a little bit, kind of started looking at it, and I was like, hey, this could also actually maybe replace mailing lists. Then we found out that some other open source groups like Ghost are moving their community entirely to that. And that's a bridge too far, I think, right now. But I figured I would start the conversation. So I couldn't sleep last night, and I kind of wrote out an entire cap, and I'm drafting it. But I do want to put one of the first things on there is like, this is not the let's replace Slack cap. If you want to lead that, by all means, someone else do that. But I'm starting to think of, wouldn't it be great if we had a nice integrated forum that had the match Kubernetes branding? In some of the examples, the Docker community does a really great job of integrating that, and it looks really nice and things like that. There's some concerns. How does it relate to Stack Overflow and mailing lists, and how much work is this and all that kind of stuff? And I'm kind of covering that in the KEP. And mostly I'm thinking, hey, maybe it might be worth checking out a prototype. So if you're into that kind of thing, check out the Captain Draft. It's in my personal namespace. And I'll be kind of nibbling at it for the rest of the week. That's all I have.
Thank you, George. And then Aaron, it looks like you're rounding us out.
Yeah, just wanted to share the screen to show you if you haven't seen it yet. This thing right here, if you go to go.gates.io/GitHub labels, you get linked to this doc. It's generated based off the labels file. So I'm trying to make this the place that everybody goes to when they're asking questions like, what does this GitHub label mean? Why do we have this GitHub label? So here's the description of like, what are the labels that should be here? They're labels that our automation consumes today. So this, just to underscore the point I was trying to make earlier, like I don't want to blast the label across all of Kubernetes unless we have automation that uses it across all of Kubernetes. How do I add a new label? Do this thing, open this PR. And then this describes sort of what the labels are, who can use them. Our intent is to eventually, so much in the same way that we have bot commands be a thing that were like a static table that humans had to update, it eventually turned into a page that's live on Prow. We want to do the same thing with labels. We're just not there yet. It seemed more important to get the content first. Also, for what it's worth, each of these labels are like deep linkable. So you can do a little click on the label and then copy paste that link over to somebody. If and when GitHub enables API access to update label descriptions without going experimental, because we don't want to use experimental APIs that could change on us without warning, we'll update the label syncing bot to also update these label descriptions via GitHub's API. Lots of things in chat. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much for doing this work, Aaron. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to chat about today?
Folks that are doing road shows, I'm almost done with mine. Let me know if you need help with yours. I will gladly pick up any other SIGs that have not been touched. It's probably the wrong word.
Yeah, I'll say actually feel free to poach mine because
Yeah, you mind if I
stuff happening at Red Hat, etc. I'm finding it hard to add additional SIG meetings to my schedule.
Yeah, I'll take service catalog from you, Josh, at least.
Okay.
I have to extend it till Monday, but I'm planning on having them all done today or this week.
Cool.
And early next week.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great. And then I'll do a quick dev stats update here. So we've designed a priority queue for requests to dev stats. And I think I saw Lucas on the line. Dan Cohn has enabled us to given us permissions to make that happen. And so how we're going to do this priority queue was that we would do it via GitHub project boards. So the submitter, so if you have a request, you'll submit a card to the project board with a thorough description of the proposed change. And then at the next Contribex DevStats meeting, which is Thursdays for anybody who's interested in joining, all new proposals will be discussed. Then if the proposal is judged to be good, the card will be moved into an approved column and the committee will assign it a priority level, high, medium, or low. And then if the committee needs additional information to judge that proposal, I will follow up with the submitter about that. If the proposal is rejected, the proposal is moved to the rejected column with a note in the card as to why the proposal was rejected. And then if any proposals are approved, I'll convert it into an issue and assign it to Lucas. So that is the current thought plan. We're going to try and implement that. I'll report back on how that goes. In about an hour, we're going to be going through some more DevStats graphs and looking at definitions and seeing if we need them and doing some pairing. So if you're interested in joining in on that, let me know and I can add you to the invite. All right. Does anybody else have anything else?
Yeah, one of this is Lucas and I have been working on finding the places where DevStats is double counting things.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody's aware that those exist based at looking at the raw numbers. So we found one thanks to a good question from I don't know what STTS's real name is. About one of the repos that led us to realizing that we were double counting commits kind of across the project. So I believe that Lucas has rolled out the retroactive recompute for that double counting commits. So if you look at DevStats, you will notice that reports that primarily count commits are going to have lower numbers than they've had in the past, retroactively. We're still looking for. There's definitely some places where we are majorly double counting contributors, and we don't know where that is yet. So if anybody has any brilliant ideas, please speak up on DevStats or on Contribex.
Great. So with that, I'm going to give everybody 4 minutes back in their mornings.
Yeah, we got a lot done.
We did.
There were a lot of stuff today. Great job,
Good
everyone.
job, team. Okay. So see you next week then.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
See ya. Happy